Let's call the meeting to order at 7:02. This is a special special meeting for the Building Commission of the Town of Long Beach. And I'm sorry, go ahead. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you're doing good.
Thanks. This is a special meeting for the Long Beach Building Commission, and it is to discuss Steve Wilson's registration, and that's really it. Everybody knows each other here. You guys all know Brad Adamski?
Yes.
You know, Steve's, well, I don't know how it is on your screen. Steve's in the upper corner, top row. Brad's in the lower corner of the second row. And then Chris Willoughby's here too. So I guess one of the first things I want to say is let's keep this civil. Everybody will get a turn to talk, and we'll just keep moving forward. So over the course of several meetings and a couple of jobs, there were some issues that Steve had with some of the places. One was, I think the first one that was brought to our attention, or Lou may have brought it to our attention, was the Perry House. The building was built outside of the approved plans, the buttress and the grade issues. The second was in the 1900 or 1902, I don't remember if it's 1900 or 1902. There were some issues that the latest, I'm sorry, was Mr. No, I can't remember his name. Directly to the east of him, called, and he said that his wall was undermined and his footing was cut. So I went down and took a look at that, and actually he hired Woodruff to bolster that up. Not Condon. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Dan Cronin called and said that his footing was cut and his wall was undermined. So he hired Woodruff to come out and sandbag it to protect it. The next one was 2615. Steve, is it 2615?
25.
You're unmuted, or you got to unmute yourself.
2516, I think, Larry, is what you're
2516.
Okay, I had it backwards. Sorry about that.
Hey, Larry, I thought this meeting only concerned 2516.
Steve, that's not my understanding, and maybe Chris can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, let's do a couple things. This is Chris. Since Mr. Wilson is represented by counsel, let's try to direct anything with regard to Mr. Wilson to Mr. Adamski, just so that we keep, and then Mr. Adamski can decide what he will speak on behalf of his client or not, so that we keep it civil and orderly. Overall, this is for the most recent violations. The previous, you're allowed to take the history of violations here, but I do want to remind the Commission that Mr. Wilson previously served a suspension based on some previous violations, which was, I believe, a 6-month period. So, this is overall for the current violations and consideration of those of which, again, you can initiate that discussion. Larry, you and I spoke, but for the benefit of everybody, it seems to me to be beneficial to lay out there what the Building Commission's the allegations with regard to violations, and allow Mr. Adamski and Mr. Wilson to refute and rebut those, and then we get to have some discussion after that.
Okay. So sorry about that, Steve. I didn't understand that completely. The 2516 was a water damage situation where Steve got a permit to repair the inside and then bolster up the foundation wall. There were a couple of issues there. There was a no street cut permit, and which left Lakeshore Drive exposed, and I can't remember if it was the Christmas holiday.
Thanksgiving.
Or Thanksgiving, I think it was. So then heavy equipment was used, and that's why we actually have Tom Dolph come down and tell us what, or tell the would be Steve, what he had to do in order to bolster up the road so that it was safe. And that's all I have. And I think probably the best thing to do, Chris, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is go through the building commission, and then we'll turn it over to Steve and Brad.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, just so that we have all of the complaints and allegations of violations that would warrant any action, if at all.
Okay.
And that'll allow Mr. Adamski and Mr. Wilson to address them.
So by my screen, I'll start at the top left, and that's Bob LeMay.
Yes, at 2516, we also had that issue of the gas pipe being ruptured. And, I guess to my way of thinking, a contractor registered to the town certainly should know to have that marked by the utility so that sort of thing doesn't happen. In fact, it was ruptured and then abandoned. In fact, it was only discovered when actually one of our commission members was walking by and smelled the gas. That's a problem. So I think otherwise you summarized what our issues have been, to my way of thinking.
Okay, Joy, you look like you're next. Oh, you jumped.
I really don't have anything to add to that.
Okay. John Coker?
So if I understand this, we're here because of not getting a road cut and a gas line ruptured. Is that why we're here? Is that what this hearing's about? Because if it is, then my question to Mr. Adamski, were those violations corrected? If they were violations, I haven't seen any proof of this yet, but I assume I will.
I think the best way to go about this is sort of how Chris approached it, and that's we'll let each have those questions. I'm jotting down notes as each talk.
So okay, those are my two questions.
Right, then we can come back with a consistent response.
Okay.
Joe?
Yes, I think if we talk about 2516, we have the idea with the road and the gas, and part of it is, an experienced builder knows what he has to do if he wants to dig, and he knows he should know what he has to do for the road. And then also, I think it's more than that. It's the 1900. We talked about the next door neighbor, and there have been numerous, I don't have a list of them, and I guess we could get it, of different stop work orders that have happened with Mr. Wilson. And I think the history is important because that's what we're talking about. We're not just saying just what you just said, John. We're not just saying, oh, it's one event.
But excuse me, Joe, we're here for a specific violation. I want to know what those violations are. I don't want to hear about what happened 2 years ago, okay?
John.
I don't want to hear about it.
John, don't yell.
Okay. That's all right. Everybody settle down here.
Let me make a
Go ahead, Joe.
statement. I believe, and that's what this started, and Chris is right there. I believe what we're talking about is not just the 2516 we're talking about, and John, let me see what Chris says. What we're talking about is the total picture of the builder. That's what this is about. Chris, can you tell me if I'm right or wrong?
Well, I can't tell if you're right or wrong, but I think that we have a mixture of issues that you're discussing here. First, the history, as I said a little bit earlier, I think all of it is relevant to any decision that you might make with regard to this meeting and Mr. Wilson's registration. However, you have to demonstrate what violations are current that would allow you. So by way of analogy, but not advocating for position, previously Mr. Wilson was suspended for 6 months because of violations and action was taken. In this instance, you are alleging that there are recent violations that make you want to take potential action, right? And the reason you're having this meeting is to consider whether any action should be taken. I think it's important that it's two-pronged here, that you need to demonstrate that there were indeed violations and those are substantiated, and then any ramifications as a result of those, well, then you take the rest of it into account in terms of what action, if any, that you take.
Okay, can I
Yeah,
steal?
go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so let's say number one, the history and why he was suspended before was primarily because of 1802 Lakeshore Drive. Okay, so that's the history.
Well, we're here though. We want to talk about current violations.
I'm not done, Chris. I'm not done. Let me finish. I agree. That's the history. I'm not arguing that. But the relevant, now 1900, there were certain situations that happened. I believe when he started that project, he had a stop work order. And also what Larry brought up, the other issue with the next door neighbor, that's new. That was not discussed before because 1802 was the only project that was discussed for his first instance. And then we're talking about 2516, which is also new. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, Pete?
Okay, were permits issued on all these works? 19, whatever it is, 2516 and 1902 permits were issued. Were any stop work orders placed on any of those permits?
Yes, there were stop work orders placed on both 1900 and 2516.
And were those stop work orders allowed? Were they honored?
And Pete, before we go further, Lou, what were the basis of those stop work orders?
Yeah. Okay. The stop work order on 2516 was placed because we didn't actually have the right idea as to what the foundation repair was going to be. In fact, he did do the foundation repair that he said he was going to do. It just wasn't perceived as well as it could have been. At 1900.
Lou, so that stop work order was precautionary in nature to make sure that the building commission had a handle, or there was a violation?
Well, there were other things going on. We didn't have a street cut permit, and the road was significantly compromised, and it could have been cared for a little better.
Okay, so I'll go back to my original question. Stop work orders were issued. Were those stop work order issues honored? And
Yeah, I believe they were.
I'm sorry?
I believe they were.
Okay.
And Lou, the stop work order at 1900 was because of the compromise of the neighbor's wall. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. There was really what happened was a retaining wall fell in, and the Wilson construction guys basically removed the wall as they were really cleaning up the backyard. that shouldn't have been done because they did go up a foot or two onto the Cronin property, 1902, when they removed the backfilling of that patio.
So what does that mean? I don't understand.
He went on the other guy's property.
Pete, what that did was it exposed his footing, the wall, and Steve can probably lend some information to this when it's his turn. I don't know what wall was there before on the 1900 property or 1902. I was only there after the fact. The Cronin wall was undermined and the footing was cut. So, that's not a good situation to be in because it leaves the wall structurally unsupported or unsupported structurally.
So the plans that were in the permit that were approved, were those plans followed? Did they do what they were supposed to do when they were supposed to do it? Sounds to me like no.
I don't know why the wall was removed. Lou has a better handle on that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Lou, so will you reiterate that?
Yeah, sure. It was about a 2 foot high.
Was removal of the wall in the permit?
No, I can't say. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I think that was part of the pool situation.
As a matter of fact, what happened was they had a bunch of arborvitaes on that wall right there, and they took the arborvitaes out, and I think that compromised the wall. If it, I don't know, fell over some 50, 55 degrees or so, and they took it out to put a new one in. And their intention was clearly to re-support that retaining wall and the Cronin patio.
So
and that's what we put a stop work order on.
Whose property was the wall on?
Probably about 2/3 Cronin, 1/3 Lecoq, 1900.
Lecoq.
Pete?
Right now I have no more.
Okay.
Can I, Larry,
Yeah,
can I just ask one question?
sure.
I thought also, Lou, that at the beginning of the 1900 project, we also issued a stop work order.
I'm not sure I recall that. And do you know what it was for?
Well, because in the beginning, he started to work on the wall. He even moved the front wall that wasn't in the plans. And I believe we brought that up.
I'm not sure that I did issue a stop work order on that because they changed that wall, but
And it
was an interior wall, right?
No, it's an exterior. It was an exterior wall, Lou. It's a wall. It's a wall that was in the front of the house, and it wasn't on the plans.
No, you're right, but they moved it in. They moved it to the inside. They took it from the outside and moved it to the inside and created a patio, right?
Yes, but it was an exterior wall that they moved.
Okay, Pete or Joe, is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Anybody else from the building commission? I'd like to say one more thing as from the building commission standpoint and just my general experience. Hitting a gas line happens. I've hit them. We hit 2 4-inch or 6-inch telephone wire cables when we were in Bolingbrook doing a box culvert. They were unfortunately mismarked. So that happens. We've hit them, even up here. But the issue is it's a state law that you have to call for locates, 811. And they take all the information down, and then you have to call at a minimum of 2 days before your plant on digging. And then the utilities who pay for the 811 people are all marked. Long Beach Water marks their own, but telephone, oil, gas, and I'm forgetting electric, are all marked by the 811 people. So that's before you dig, that's a law that you have to abide by. And then once those flags and the lines are painted, when you're 2 feet on either side of that line, you have to hand dig. You cannot dig with equipment. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, gas lines do get hit. I'm sure it wasn't intentional that, somebody went out there and whacked it or hit it with a backhoe, but there are procedures in place to prevent that. And Steve has talked to me a couple of times about how he called the utility and they told him that he didn't I don't know, Steve, and you can, when you guys talk, exactly what happened, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's the way it happens. You call, you have to wait 2 days, they mark the stuff, and you have to dig anywhere you get close to 2 feet of those lines, you have to dig by hand.
And does the state, the utility locate people, keep a record of what's called in?
Yes.
And we can access
What happens is, and Pete, you've probably seen them, Deanna will send them out. I think she calls them dig notices or whatever. And it's a form, and it lists the property name and address. I think it may even list my mind is going crazy, but the degrees, the longitude, latitude of where the property's at.
Right.
And then it lists the purpose, it lists how deep you're going, what you're doing it for. And then normally when you call, your name is on that. And contrary to what a lot of people believe, if I'm on a job and I call to get locates, I'm protected. But if Bob LeMay is working for me in some other capacity, he has to call as well. My locates don't transfer to Bob unless they've changed that in the last year, which I don't think they have.
And was a dig whatever we call it, a dig notice issued for this property?
No. The town did not get a notice, and I think Steve and Brad, will probably tell us what happened there, but that's just the background. Any other comments by the building commission? Brad?
Right. I'll just give a summary kind of to frame where everything is and give you the start of where we're going to go, and then I'll cede to Steve to give a little more details, and you'll probably have some individual questions for him. We'll try to limit that and keep it as focused as possible. But I think you guys, he's the one you're going to want to hear the answers from. But I guess to say preliminarily, I would say our two focuses tonight should be on that 1902 and 2516. Yes, we know about 1800. That's a previous issue. There was a suspension. There was a suspension served by Steve based on that. Not saying you can't consider it at all, but as far as the facts of what we're talking about tonight, let's focus on those two properties. As far as 1902 is concerned, I think Steve will confirm this, but where Lou was explaining what happened there with the removal of the arbor vitae, that was actually part of the plan all along. That did affect the integrity, apparently, of the retaining wall. The intention was to repair or replace that wall. The stop order came in, and now, quite frankly, it's kind of a civil matter between the property owners, the adjacent property owners, and potentially Steve as well. So I don't know how much that board needs to address that. Obviously, it happened, and it's facts that the board is discussing tonight, but it's not like he violated a stop work order or did something intentionally to avoid or—
You're cut out, Brad.
Sorry. I'm using a remote speaker, so hopefully it doesn't cut off again. But the point being that it wasn't a violation of the plans. It wasn't an intentional violation to go over to that other property other than to mitigate any potential damages that were being done by that failed retaining wall. The bigger issue, and I think what really brought this all to the board's attention back in December, where this started, was the gas line. And what Steve will talk about there is he had a subcontractor that was doing the excavating. The gas line was actually to be retired and removed by NIPSCO. He'll give you the details and the timeline on that, but that would explain the lack of marking. It was believed to be a retired line. When the line was ruptured, the subcontractor contacted Steve, and Steve did exactly what he's supposed to do under code, which was contact the operator, which was NIPSCO. The subcontractor, Steve will confirm this, but was not on site at the time because apparently there was cell phone reception issues, so they had left to get reception to contact Steve. At least that's what we're being told. So it's not as if it was ruptured and abandoned and just kind of left there for the town to find. Obviously, that's what happened. Whether it was a report to Mr. Jogman or Mr. LeMay, somebody in the town reported it. But I can tell you, and Steve will confirm, that already at that time, NIPSCO was being contacted. And again, with Mr. Byvote's questions, yes, stop work orders were issued. Lou explained the situations on both of those. And since those stop work orders have been issued, Mr. Wilson has honored those and not creating a situation like what happened before with the Perry property. He's abiding by the board's rules, perhaps to his detriment, even with the Cronin complaint, because as that property sits there, had it been repaired back in January or late December, the potential for damages could have been mitigated. So I think that at least summarily covers what the board is wanting to address with Steve. And now I'll cede to him so that he can provide details and confirm what I've just said. Steve, let's start with the gas line, because that, again, seems to be what brought this focus to the board. And they need answers, and they need explanation of how that all came about.
I'd like to address, am I off mute?
We can hear you.
We can hear you, but Steve, there's some feedback. If you got your phone by or something?
No, I don't know what the heck. Just like I don't know what happened to my Zoom picture now.
We see you. We can see you.
We can see you, and sometimes, Steve, it may be better if you can't see the picture. If you just
there you go. But I want to start by addressing. I filed for a foundation repair permit, which I received, and we weren't doing what we believe to be any street cutting. So I never pulled a permit because I wasn't honestly aware that I even needed a permit because the work that was going on was within the boundary lines of the house itself, and we weren't doing anything along the street line. And when we were told that we had to have a street cut permit, I applied for one. They asked me to add gravel because we had created a ramp for the excavator to get down. When we were told to do that, we put the gravel in. And I had applied for the street cut permit along with the bond that was required. So all of that was done based on, yes, it was after the fact, but it was something that I honestly was not, when I applied for the foundation permit, nobody told me I needed to get a street cut permit because my understanding was we weren't doing anything along the street that would require a street cut permit. So that's my response there. We had pulled a permit, and when we were told we needed the additional permit, we did it. In the meantime, we repaired the foundation wall, And I had hired Mendoza to do the repair work along with the excavating. And Mendoza is a registered Long Beach contractor. And we had called in to get the service retired. And what we had done that, NIPSCO, which we didn't know at the time, NIPSCO generated 2 tickets. One was for the meter removal and basically, putting some sort of stop at the end of the line. And then the second permit was issued for the retirement of the line. We came out the next day, the meter was removed, and the assumption when I called NIPSCO, they told me the ticket was closed out, the work was completed. I never even thought to ask that they had issued a separate ticket for the retirement. This is not the gas main, this is the feed to the house. And then, Brad, I'm not sure how many days after NIPSCO, they did their work on the 7th, like November 17th or something. And we didn't start excavating it until, I don't know what that date is. Do you have that, Brad?
I've got the dates. The retirement order went in on the 15th and the meter was removed on the 16th. The excavation was on the 22nd. That's all November.
Yeah, I concur with that. I talked to NIPSCO and the 811 state about the dates of the line being retired and the meter being pulled. It was a whole week before he did the work.
And what happened was when Mendoza hit the line, they didn't have signal. And part of, Mendoza, they have some communication problems. They contacted me and, I followed NIPSCO's guidelines, telling them, and NIPSCO clearly states if there's a utility, any sort of damage that's done to any utility, they tell you to leave the premises and contact them. You don't stay around the gas leak, you don't stay around electrical or whatever it may be. They tell you to leave the property and contact them, which is what I instructed Mendoza's crew to do, not go back. And where the gas was leaking, and yes, it was leaking, but it was leaking 20 foot inside the property lines of 2516 Lakeshore Drive, where it was excavated. No one could ever, where it was excavated, you couldn't walk down there and reach the line. There's no way anyone was going to, enter that property and somehow get to the gas line. The gas is under pressure, so even if it were to ignite, it's not running back up to the main. That's impossible. Gas can't ignite unless there's oxygen. So NIPSCO, there was a delay in them getting out. NIPSCO's also dealing like everyone else with they have a shortage of manpower due to COVID. I just recently had work done. They had 3 crews that they combined to one because there's such a shortage of personnel. When they got out there, they ended up, I think they actually retired the line, which I don't know why when they were initially out there they didn't do it, but they ended up retiring the line, and which was what all along was based on them closing out the ticket, was the assumption that the gas line had been retired. And that's all I can tell you about that. I don't know what more I can lend to that situation. I think we responded and acted appropriately in a safe manner. And it's my belief there was absolutely zero endangerment to the public because of where the leak was at and how far away from the street it was.
And the section of the Indiana Code that controls that is found at Indiana Code 8126. 812621 deals with action after damage occurs. And that's where it says any person responsible for an excavation or demolition operation that results in damage to an underground facility shall immediately, upon discovery of the damage, notify the operator of the facility, which in this case is NIPSCO, which is what they did, and then allow the operator of the facility reasonable time to accomplish necessary repairs before completing the excavation or demolition. So as far as, I mean, the subcontractor was the excavator in this case. They're the ones that caused the damage. Upon causing the damage, they notified Steve. Steve, as a general, contacted the operator, which is exactly what he's obligated to do under Indiana Code. So just put that.
This is Chris. Lou, have you corroborated any of that portion of it in terms of the phone calls after the fact? And I'm just asking. I don't know. I'm not saying that's in your purview.
Yeah, no, I have no way of knowing when Mendoza called Steve or as far as I know, Joe Jogman notified Long Beach Fire Department, and who notified NIPSCO, I think, after the break was discovered. So I can tell you that Steve called NIPSCO to get the meter pulled and the line retired about a week before Mendoza was doing the work.
Sure.
And actually, NIPSCO was quite surprised when I called them to talk about it, that they had already done that work, and that there was that was a day later, and they knew that there was a line break at that point.
Sure. And Mr. Adamski, do you know, I'm sure in your experience, I know in my private practice I've experienced, but NIPSCO does not shy away in terms of going after being made whole with regard to the repairs and the costs. So has that notification come to Mr. Wilson or gone to the subcontractor, and has that been satisfied?
We don't know as far as the subcontractor, but Steve can respond if he received anything. My understanding is no, but correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. We can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Steve. Now we can't hear you at all.
Got to get rid of that phone next to it.
Try it now.
He's muted now. How about just an affirmative or a negative response to this question, Steve? Has NIPSCO contacted you for any reimbursement on that damage line? No.
Okay, this is Pete Bibles. I don't understand what's going on here. Who asked to retire the line?
I can tell you that Steve Wilson called to retire the line.
Yeah.
Okay.
They called NIPSCO, not 811, but NIPSCO directly. 811 performs the function of calling the utilities after they mark them out.
So
811 was not called.
Well, Pete,
the process is to ask to have a line retired, and then when is the contractor notified that the line has been retired?
I don't believe there's any notification at all.
if I could add something here, and as I said earlier, hitting a gas line, I don't want to say it's common, but it happens. It's an accident. But I think the issue here isn't what happened after, or even the request to retire the gas line. The law is that you have to call 2 days before you dig. So the gas line was hit. But if you don't have all the electric marked and the water and oil or anything else marked, you run the same risk of hitting those, even if the gas line was retired. That's why the law says you've got to give them 24 or 48 hours notice before you dig. And they mark all of those. They would have marked the gas, they would have marked the electric, Long Beach would have marked the water, Comcast would have marked, and AT&T would have marked. There's an oil pipeline that sometimes comes out, but it's the same guy marks all of them for the utilities. But that's the issue. And you know, I think when Brad talked or Chris talked about liability, if you don't call, whether it was Steve or the excavator, you're going to pay. Because you violated the law, the state law, and you caused damage to the gas line, obviously, and the, you know, gas, and I can't remember from gas school what the exact percentage is, but it needs 14% oxygen, I think, to be able to burn. Yeah. So that's the issue. The issue is calling for locates. I mean, if you're going to put a mailbox in your yard, you need to call for locates, because if you're digging down and you hit one of those utilities and you didn't call, you're going to pay for fixing it.
Right. And we'll agree with that. And that comes from that Indiana code section I cited too, the 8-1-26. And section 16 is where it talks about the notice, and it's at least 2 days, but no more than 20 days. So you get that window to give them notice. And what it actually is, it's a statute that provides protection to the contractor. Because if you provide that notice and then you still hit the line, you've provided the notice. And there's, you know, whether it's protection from the municipality or from the utility company, that's basically your shield, is that notice that you're to provide. It does say that each person responsible for the excavation or the demolition shall provide the notice. So I guess our question there would be, maybe it's more appropriate that the subcontractor who actually did the excavation should be answering those questions as far as why 811 wasn't contacted, realizing Steve was the general of the project.
And I appreciate the clarification on the dig notice and all that stuff, but I'm still confused between the time this thing was hit, when as Larry said, the dig notice should have been issued and lines marked and all that kind of stuff. And then I think, Brad, you talked about you're supposed to vacate the area or something like that. Give no warning. Don't let anybody know that there's a gas leak. I mean, to me, that's totally irresponsible. I don't care whether anybody had to crawl over, 5 miles to get to it. There was a gas leak. It's not like Steve this is his first rodeo. He's been doing this for years, and that's the way he advertises himself. So there's some level of knowledge here that has been ignored or overlooked. And I'd like to know, I'm confused about the time between it was actually hit, the time they were notified, and I don't buy at all that it's the subcontractor's responsibility. They may have done it, but he's the general contractor. He's the one that's responsible for doing this. He's
the one who ultimately contacted NIPSCO. So just to run through the timeline on that for everybody and to give a little better explanation of it too. 11/15 was when the order was put in to retire and remove the gas meter. NIPSCO came out quickly, 11/16, removed the meter. From Steve's understanding and the subcontractor's understanding, NIPSCO completed their job. They removed the meter and retired the line. That's where the confusion.
Wait a minute. Did they give him some official notice?
No, just the physical removal of the meter, and that's where the confusion comes in. Because all they did was remove the meter.
I understand that. But then, something's missing here. Shouldn't he have asked the question that says, did you get rid of the gas line? I know I would have asked that.
If you called in and made the order requesting that the gas line be removed and the meter be removed and the gas line be retired, and one is done, I think, yes, it's an assumption and obviously an incorrect assumption in this case, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that they did the entirety of the job.
I don't agree. I don't agree it's reasonable. Did he get any official notice that the line was retired and removed? And does NIPSCO normally do that? Or do they just come in and pull stuff out and disappear?
I think Mr. Mellon said that they don't typically give that notice. But yeah, obviously in hindsight, that would have been the appropriate confirmation at least.
I'm sorry, Brad, go ahead.
I was just going to say, now when the gas line was ruptured on the 22nd, the phone calls were made around 3:14, 3:10 Central Time from Steve to NIPSCO. And I understand, Mr. Bivets, yes, there seems like there should be more than just notifying the operator. And that section of the code actually does go beyond that and say that if it is a toxic, corrosive, or flammable gas or liquid, in addition to contacting the local police, there should be contact to the fire and police department in the area.
Was that done?
That would be after Steve talked with NIPSCO, and I think hopefully he can respond to this too if his audio is working. His understanding was there was not a fire hazard at the property based on where the break was.
Okay, well, that's not the way.
Can you address that, Steve? I think that's consistent with what he said earlier. Your audio is still not working, Steve.
Okay, I'm going to take it as a no. He did not talk to the fire department or notify anybody.
Nor did he say he did. He just simply said he contacted NIPSCO.
Right, and it was a toxic leak, as you indicated. So there's some negligence there, in my opinion, from a person who's been doing this work for 20 years in the town. Let me go further with the street cut issue. Again, he's cut streets before. What has happened? How did this street cut occur and he didn't know about it? And how did the contractor know about it? If whoever the contractor, Mendoza, they've been doing this for years. Every municipality I know requires, if you go into the street, into the right of way, and you cut into it, you have to have a street cut permit. Yes or no? The answer is yes. So there's negligence on that part. So all this raising my hands and saying I didn't know about this, hey, culpa.
Can you guys hear me now?
Steve, why don't you get off the other computer? Shut the other computer off and talk on the one you're talking on now.
Yeah, close the computer, at least mute it.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so number one, once again, I didn't get a street cut permit because we weren't where we needed one, because we weren't doing any work along the street. So that's the reason we did. And this was the first time I've ever been told to have a street cut permit by Long Beach. I've never, ever had a street cut permit because this is the first time I've ever had to get a bond for a street cut. So I had to go get insurance in order to be able to even pull the street cut permit. Secondly, when I had called NIPSCO, I had already been informed that the fire department was already out there. By the time I got notified by Mendoza, the fire department was already out there, and I had already called NIPSCO, so I didn't need to call the fire department. They were already there. So that's that. Lastly, and Larry said it pretty clearly, the person doing the work is responsible for calling Mystic. Each individual who's doing the work is responsible for contacting NIPSCO for Mystic, to contact Mystic to get locates done. That's the responsibility of subcontractor. They're not going to use my locates. They're responsible. And Indiana code clearly states they're responsible for contacting Mystic. And lastly, and I think this confirms, the utility commission for NIPSCO, has chosen not to prosecute anybody for the cost of whatever labor they had to do in order to retire the line, because they've taken some culpability because of the second ticket that what nobody knew about. I mean, when NIPSCO, they did one line, but that's still, I mean, that was from my standpoint. But ultimately, I'm not the guy who should be calling in Mystic. Who's ever doing the digging, and that's what the law says, is responsible for calling Mystic.
I think everybody's kind of mixing and melding the issues together. NIPSCO does not locate anything. 811 is the locate service. And when Brad talks about the statute or whatever, the 24 or the 48 hours is from Mystic. If you call NIPSCO and say, hey, I'm going to dig here, would you come out and mark the gas line? Number one, they won't do it. And number two, they're not going to mark everybody else. That's why it's imperative that you call Mystic. So this gas line was hit. But as I mentioned earlier, what about the electric? What about the water? What about electric is red, water is blue, gas is yellow. So those are they're two separate issues. When NIPSCO retires a line or NIPSCO comes out on a repair or something, they call Mystic and come out and mark for them. It's you can't mix the two of them because it's two separate entities, and NIPSCO does not mark their own utilities.
So when you get to the site and you see that there are no markings for gas, oil, water, or electricity, wouldn't that be a hint that nobody did the locate?
What happens, Bob, is when you call Mystic and the locate people come out, and some of them have their own, but the one locate people does NIPSCO stuff, the 811. But what they do is they come out, and let's say electric. If there's no electric there, they'll take red paint, which is electric, and they'll put okay, no lines here, and they'll circle it. Same thing with gas, same thing, Long Beach marks their own water. So by looking at the pavement or on the ground where you're going to dig, if there's anything there, because they will tell you either yes and mark it and put flags on it, which everybody's seen, or they mark it and tell you that it's clear.
So if there's no markings, somebody should have known that no locate was done.
That's correct.
Can I know everybody's throwing stuff. If I have a turn, I'd like to ask a couple questions.
You can have a turn, Joe.
Okay. The first thing is I'd like to hear on that day, a timetable on that day when whoever ran whatever they did to disturb the gas line, whatever process was used. What is the timetable on that day? Does anybody know what time did they start? What time did they possibly hit this, or anything like that? Does anybody have any idea?
I don't know.
I know we don't. I'm asking.
I could go back in the fire department log and tell you what time the call went through, but that's
Larry,
all I would be able to do, Joe.
Larry, I know exactly the fire department log because I was there. What I'm asking for is what happened earlier during the day, and the people that did the work. We, the building commission, don't have a clue, but the people that did the work, somebody should know when they hit the gas and etc. That's what I'm curious about. Does anybody know that? All right.
Steve, do you know when Mendoza was on site that day? I've got you down making the call.
They were on site till about 2:30 when they contacted me, and so they left at around 2:30. They contacted me. I called NIPSCO at 3, and by 3 o'clock, the town Long Beach Volunteer Fire Department was already out there.
Yeah, because I was out there probably 2:15 to 2:30. When I was out there, I happened to drive by. I just got out of the car just to see what was going, how it looked, and that's when I noticed the gas. So I was there at that time. There was nobody else there, and then I went to the fire department and notified them. Now, also, Steve, were you also concerned about a water leak?
Yes, that's how you found out, Joe. You didn't happen to walk by. The water department told you.
No, Steve. Steve, I don't think you can speak for me. I'm speaking for myself. Okay, Steve?
Okay.
You have an
Okay,
opinion?
no,
You have an opinion?
we're only going to talk one at a time.
Let me finish. Let me finish. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
So yes, Steve, I did drive by. Nobody was there. That's a fact. I drove by. I had the car. I double parked. I didn't get a ticket. Luckily, I got out just to see what was going on. And then I was standing up at the top of the hill to see about there is damage to the road, but I'm not talking about that right now. Then I just looked down there and looked at it, and then I got the smell. I said, holy shit, there's a gas leak. So that was probably anywhere from 2:30 to 2:45. I got in the car and I went over to the police department, and that's when I notified everybody, and that's when they came out there. So that was done then. Also, I talked with the people at the water, and that's when I found out when I was in the building. This is after I was at the location. I was in the building, and I was chatting with the water people were there, and they said, oh yeah, Steve was worried about that they also broke a water line. So that's all I'm just trying to get a feel for what happened. All right.
Well, Joe, that's exactly why you call to locate people. You know, we're concentrating on this gas main, but it's the water lines get marked, the electric, as I said, I've said it 3 times, but it's a preventative insurance for anybody that's on site.
Okay, so that's number one. If I could just finish, I apologize. So that's number one. That's my take on the gas line. Now, number 2, on the street, there is a stake. I don't know if it's still there, but there was a stake there all along that showed the property line. And that stake is far from the street. And when you guys got done with whatever you were doing, that street was dangerous because all of it was cut out with that bulldozer. And you were all the way to the street, and you could verify from the fire department when they were there, they had to put up protection so people wouldn't drive off the street. So there was a problem also with the street from my opinion. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. One other thing that I did bring up, and I just want to verify. Now I'm talking a little bit of history and a little bit character, but I asked earlier, and I talked about, because the property number is 1900. The next door neighbor is 1902. But I did remember that there was a stop work order given early in 1900. I looked it up, and on March 12th, 2021, there was a stop work order issued, and the reason for the stop work order issue was that there was no permit for doing the work. Thank you.
Okay,
I'm a little
anybody else?
I'm a little disturbed to hear Steve tell me that gas leak is not a problem and that somehow that there was no chance that it would ignite. Larry, I think you said oxygen burns gas gas ignites at 14% oxygen.
I'm not exactly sure if that's
Well,
the number, but I think it's around
Yeah.
that. Gas leaks are serious.
Last time I checked, Earth's atmosphere was 20% oxygen. And I know my fireplace ignites every time I turn the gas on and put a lighter to it. So
Right.
I think this is a dangerous situation.
No, gas leaks are very serious. And what happens is when you have a gas leak, normally it's done just as what happened on Steve's job. It's normally done by a piece of heavy equipment because they didn't dig by hand on 2 feet either side, which is a requirement. So what can happen is you can separate that line from something in the house and still have a leak. But if the pipe has still got any structural capability left, you may have pulled it from the inside of the house and gas is being pumped into the house. Gas leaks are serious, no matter if it's a dime-sized rip or they're serious business. We train on it as the fire department all the time. Anything else from the building commission members? Steve, Brad? Steve, are you awake?
I'm here. Brad, do you want me to respond?
As far as the gas comments that were just made?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, if somehow I communicated that I wasn't concerned about the gas leak, that's just not true. I called it in when I was notified, and had NIPSCO come out. I didn't get, I was not in the area at the time, and I contracted with Mendoza to do the work. As far as locates, the water was shut off at the street, which it should have been, because the reason I was there in the first place was about 83,000 gallons of water went through that house. The electric was overhead, so we knew the electric was overhead. It was functioning. The only utility left at the time was the gas line. And, as I said, NIPSCO, they've already done their analysis of the accident. They're not holding anyone financially responsible because of the way their paperwork stated it. Now that still doesn't relieve Mendoza from the responsibility of calling Mystic. I mean, they're doing the work. They're responsible, as the law states, to contact Mystic and get them out there.
So Steve, you weren't worried about hitting the water or the electric line?
The water was already shut off at the street, Bob, and the electric line was overhead. It was impossible to hit the electric line.
Right, but okay, so the water's shut off. You hit that line and you rupture it, and then when it gets turned on, that's a problem, right?
We were going to, with this renovation, there's a whole new water line going in, Bob.
The danger there, and Steve, I'm sure you probably are aware of this. The danger there, again, if you don't have it marked, and that excavator hooks onto that water line, and he pulls that thing and pops it out of the water main, you don't know it until the whole hill's caved in and Lakeshore Drive's undermined. So, I mean, I don't want to beat around the bush anymore. The issue is that Mystic was not called. Regardless of what happened after the fact when the gas line was hit, Mystic was not called. The state law says that you have to call them 48 hours before you dig.
And I don't dispute that, but the state law also says the person doing the work is responsible for calling Mystic. Because ultimately, and you've said it, Larry, each subcontractor is responsible for calling Mystic. If Mendoza, calls Mystic, and then I have a plumbing company come out, the plumber's also responsible for calling Mystic.
you know, I mean, I hired a licensed registered contractor out of Long Beach to do their job. You know, I did my part, which was to get the line retired. But as far as the, you know, contacting Mistig, that, in my opinion, is not my responsibility. That's the person doing the work. Am I wrong there, Larry?
Specifically, that section of the code, it's right there, 8/1/2616. Says before commencing an excavation or demolition operation described in this section of this chapter, each person responsible for the excavation or demolition shall, and then it gets in the noticing. So yes, even if Steve does have the responsibility, Mendoza also did. They were the ones doing the excavating.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the point trying to make here.
It's prudent business practice as a contractor. When you're going on a site and it's going to be dug, you call, because that protects you. Mendoza needs to call, the plumber needs to call, everybody needs to call. But as I said, prudent business practices are you call so that you know that you're protected. And that guy will come out there 7 times in a week to mark if you've got 7 different people calling him. But it's the only way you can be protected. Okay, anybody else?
Well, let me just ask a question. I mean, if I'm a general contractor, aren't I responsible for the whole job? And if something
Yes.
important is happening, wouldn't I have at least noticed, like what Bob brought up, that there was no marking? So therefore, wouldn't I put a question in my mind, what happened here? And maybe Mendoza didn't do a good job, but wouldn't I just check on it? Because that's what I do as a general contractor of the job.
Joe, this is Chris. I don't think anybody's disputing that Steve, as the general contractor, has responsibility for the overall job. I think what they're pointing out is the actual person, and likely the bill that comes from NIPSCO is going to Mendoza for actually hitting the line. So you're not wrong. It's just we have a couple of different jurisdictions or authorities here that apply, right? We have the state code that talks about who's responsible for calling. And, you know, we have the town code, which, you know, that permit is issued under Mr. Wilson's name, right, in the work. So he's ultimately responsible, and he's responsible for his subs. But there's some culpability for the contractor. So you're not wrong in your statement of, you know, best practices or ideal practices, but there's culpability under the code for both parties, perhaps.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'd like to just summarize
Sure.
what I've heard. Number one, the street cut permit was not requested, although Steve indicates he never knew it was supposed to be done. It's the contractor's responsibility to understand the ordinances, flat out. The dig locate was not done. The retaining wall was not done according to plan, even though it might be a civil issue. There was a permit issued to do things, and this retaining wall that impacted the other person was done improperly. So that's an issue. A wall, as I understood it, a wall was moved in the house that was not on the plans. What else? The stop work order, a stop worker was issued for no permit, which is a clear violation in itself, whether or not the permit was asked for and filled out later. And the issue of just walking away or somebody not notifying or setting up a warning situation around a gas leak, to me, is probably the most egregious thing on the whole thing. And it took Joe. Joe was the one who notified the police and the fire, not anybody else. So we don't know how much time was done between the time Mendoza cut it, split, and didn't properly notify anybody. The first person they should have notified, or group they should have notified, was the fire department. So I've got a list of things here that are, to me, inexcusable, and more so, This is an individual who has been working in Long Beach and construction for 20 years, put it that way. If something you want to correct me, that's fine. So that's what I've heard so far. If anybody wants to change that, let me know.
Anything else from the building commission?
Well, I'd like to know just who is responsible to get the street cut permit, Mr. Wilson or Mr. Mendoza?
Mr. Wilson.
And I realize best practices, but who is responsible legally?
Both.
What I'm hearing
Whoever.
is Mendoza should have got it.
No.
Both of them should have got it.
The guy that goes in and gets the building permit is responsible to follow all of the rules, which in this case meant a street cut permit. Subcontractors, with the exception of out in our town, with the exception of electrical, do not get their own permits. They're under the umbrella of the general contractor's permit.
And I think that's just confusion of the two issues we were talking about. We weren't saying that Mendoza should have pulled the permit on the street cut. Steve's comment on that was he's never needed a street cut permit previously. He didn't understand or believe one was needed for this project. Where Mendoza's responsibility comes in is under that Indiana code as far as notifying Mystic or the 811 on before excavating. Two different things. But
Larry, this is Chris. Was Mr. Wilson cited? So there was a stop work order, and as I understand, just so we're clear on this issue, with regard to the road cut, stop work order, he needed a permit, he got that permit. Was he cited? And if he was cited, was the citations paid?
I'm going to have to ask Lou about that.
Wilson was not cited for not having a street cut permit. He was told he needed one, and he went in and got it.
And did he stop work as a result, or did he conduct any work outside of the stop work orders that you're aware of? I know.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I mean, he did it in a timely manner. It wasn't that he didn't want to do it. He actually kind of responded to me like he didn't know he needed to get a street cut permit. But the bottom line is the equipment was damaging the edge of the road. Okay, and that's what constitutes a requirement for a street cut permit.
Sure. He was told to get a permit, and he got a permit. Is that correct or not?
That'd be correct. Yes, sir.
So as soon as he was told, he corrected it.
And has the road been secured and sufficient to where the town's not at a loss as a result of that work?
Yes, it was.
Tom Dolph said he's probably going to have to do some asphalt repair there, but that's going to be down the road when Steve's done.
And just to be clear about who's responsible for calling Mistig, Brad, you read us the statute, and the statute said each person responsible for the work is responsible to make the phone call. So that is not just Mr. Mendoza. That also is Mr. Wilson.
And I think that's what I said is Steve's got a responsibility. I was just pointing out Mendoza ultimately does too before they do the digging.
Yep.
Okay, anything else from the building commission?
Do you want me to discuss 1900 Lakeshore Drive, Cronin?
I think
Well, if there's a civil matter going on, I don't know that you'd want to do that. Chris, you want to chime in here?
That really isn't the town's issue. That's up to Mr.
Okay.
Dan to advise his client and the Cronins if they're here. Where we wouldn't get involved is it with any battle between them or issue or litigation. But if there's a violation, there might be things that are pertinent to your determination.
I think without having Steve comment on that for the risk of making comment that could affect a civil hearing, the point is it was removing of the trees that ultimately or allegedly led to the deterioration of a retaining wall. So anything that he did that was beyond or potentially did that was beyond the scope of the permit that he had was being done on an emergency basis. It was to mitigate any damages. And then once the stop work order was issued, he halted. He hasn't done anything on that. And that's now where Cronin's have hired, I think he said, Woodruff and Sons to come in and shore that up. So
They put sandbags in along his house.
But the issue from the town's perspective is not what the two parties fight over. It's did he do permit work outside of what he was permitted to do? The answer appears to be yes.
No, it is not. It's no, Joe. I had received an emergency. I requested an emergency permit in order to repair the fallen retaining wall so that it didn't undermine Cronin's. I was then issued a stop work order on that emergency work, so I couldn't repair the foundation wall.
But the undermining of the wall, Steve, was done before the stop work order came in, right? Lou?
Well,
I'm sorry, not Steve, Lou.
But the issue is, was that work in line with the permit, or was that outside of it?
it was an emergency permit. When the foundation
the work that caused the initial damage,
the removal of the trees.
Was that part of the permit?
that was a permit that was provided to the landscaper. I did not go in for that permitting. That was not part of any scope I had.
The permit has not been issued, correct, Joe?
Yeah, I don't know of a permit for
Yeah.
trees, no.
So there was no permit. There was no permit on that particular work. And Steve's saying that it was his landscaper or whoever's landscaper that.
I didn't
did the
hire the
damage.
landscaper, the homeowners did.
Yeah.
That's the LeCue's hired them.
And do you know the name of that landscaper, Steve?
Toparius.
Okay, I don't believe that we've ever issued a permit for that. We can check that for us.
I don't think I'm representing the homeowner on that too, and I know we've had communications with the landscaper. They're doing work to provide a permit on the overall project, and I don't think that's been submitted yet. So
No, it hasn't. They sent us drawings and there's been no permit issued. So, we could put that to bed. And I have no idea whose retaining wall looked like what and what trees before the fact, because the only thing I saw was Cronin's wall undermined and his footing cut.
And I would like to clarify, the retaining wall was located on the Lecoq's property. It did not encroach into Cronin's property. And Cronin insisted and Lou issued a stop work order. So we never had the opportunity to repair replace the fallen retaining wall to try and mitigate any potential damages to Cronin, and that's where it stood.
Steve, I'd like to correct you on one thing. We don't issue stop work orders because a homeowner calls from next door and says, "Hey, stop this guy's work." It doesn't happen that way. So,
well, no, Cronin had said that. I don't know what Cronin. I'm not sure.
it's not.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands that a stop work order was not issued because a neighbor called and said he wanted a stop work order issued.
Right.
Okay. Anything else from the building commission? Brad, Steve.
I guess I would just kind of say in closing, I mean, obviously this was an important meeting trying to get this set since late December. Appreciate that you guys moved it to convenience us as far as scheduling goes, but there are standards that Steve has to abide by, but those also standards the board has to abide by. And I mean, the the decision you make towards him has got to be consistent with what you do with other contractors. And I think it's safe to say that the board, is going to act professionally and not take this personally. This is personal to Steve. This is his business. This is his livelihood. And he's been working on an average of about 5 permits a year. I don't know if it's 20 years, like somebody said earlier, but that's quite a few projects that Steve's got with the community. That cuts both ways. Yes, he should be familiar with your laws and rules, but it also shows that he is a contributing part of the community. So.
Okay, what's the building commission's pleasure here?
The town maintains this list of registered contractors, and the list of registered contractors hopefully gives homeowners some degree of confidence that the contractor that they choose is reputable and not going to leave them in the lurch. And we have a history with Mr. Wilson. We have the 1802. We had the suspension for 6 months. In looking at this, it doesn't appear that suspension has gotten his attention. And I'm concerned about protecting the homeowners in Long Beach who might decide they want to use them. I'm concerned that these homeowners don't know what they're getting into. I'd make a motion to suspend the registration. I'm done.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment.
Pete?
Not only the state of Indiana mandates certain elements to be put in every municipality's code. That is the enforcement of contractor registration, the ordinances in the town, particularly Title 15 land usage. Every municipality has to abide by those. So it's not just a matter of maybe a homeowner not knowing what they're doing. We have a responsibility to uphold the laws. And in my opinion, we've had several instances right here where somebody should have known better, somebody should have acted differently, and there's only one person responsible for this. Whether or not others are additionally responsible, that's fine, but ultimately one person is responsible, and that's the general contractor, and every general contractor is required to follow these rules, understand the ordinances. There's no excuse for being ignorant of an ordinance. I will second Bob's motion.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to move to amend his motion to put Mr. Wilson on probation for 6 months, possibly institute a fine of $2,500 or so, and see that, all our rules and regulations are followed, put him on a short leash. I hate to see a guy, lose his business over what I'm hearing is, I'm not going to say it would hold up in court, but it's not a lot of specific items that you can definitely prove if you ever get into a courtroom. It seems a little weak. I understand what Bob and Pete's saying. You guys have been around a lot longer than me on this commission, but still. I'd like to see something a little less than suspension of his license.
Dr. LeMay and Mr. Cover, this is Chris. Either way, if you go, there's a motion and a second with Dr. LeMay's, or if you're inclined to amend that, I think you should put time frames on, whether it's suspension or probation and review of the, those kinds of things. Probably.
I thought I mentioned about 6 months.
Okay, I just want to make sure both, whatever it ends up being, that there's a definitive timeline and maybe a review period that's set in there as well, or if it's suspension that he applies for reinstatement, et cetera. So
What, in order, if So it has to go back to Bob, correct? If he will amend the motion, is that correct, Chris?
No, I think
No, you have to vote on my amendment.
first off, the amendment needs to be seconded.
Yes. Or Dr. LeMay can amend, so however.
Can I, are you waiting for something, or can I ask a question?
No, go ahead, Joe.
All right, John, I see. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Now, and I think I understand, whatever. I'm not going to get into what you think and what I think. But, okay, so say you have whatever you want to call it, a suspension or whatever for 6 months. Okay, then what follows then? Is there some type of something? I don't know what the right word is. I apologize, guys. But is there like, there's a certain guideline, or there's a certain something, or does it say, okay, 6 months of him not working, that makes him a better general contractor, so therefore he could start all over again?
Well, I don't know. And if I said suspension, I meant like probation. But, you know, have, like Chris said, some sort of review just to make sure that, you know, all the rules are followed, and our building inspector maybe gives him a little more attention than otherwise. I don't know. It's
Okay, John.
and some sort of a fine.
Okay, all right, John. Thank you for. Let me ask you the question, then, so I get clarity. So what you're saying is he would continue working as a probation means he would continue working. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't understand that. I apologize. Thank you.
All right, do we have a second to the amendment? All right, Chris, I'm going to have to ask for your help. So what happens to that amendment then?
Well, it dies, right? So we just have the motion second for Dr. LeMay's.
Okay.
Dr. LeMay, I do think it would be important to clarify. Yeah, you've just said suspension, so it might be important to clarify what the time frame, and if that motion is successful, what actions may be to reinstitute that.
My motion would be for indefinite suspension. I think we've been through the 6 months already. I guess I didn't say that. So if that's a different motion, or I guess we'd make an amendment. I guess I'd make an amendment saying indefinite suspension. So I make that motion for that amendment.
Is there a second for that?
No doubt.
Joe, are you talking?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, Larry. Thank you. Maybe you could sense it. All right, so okay, we're waiting for somebody to second that, so there's no conversation yet.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, how about a year? Does anybody second a year?
I'll second that, Joy.
Okay. Okay, any discussion?
This is Pete. I would like to say that after the year, we come to some agreement. I don't know what that agreement should be or require, but I agree with Mr. Coker's idea of putting some sort of leash on this. But we have to determine who's going to pay for this leash and who's going to monitor this reinstatement. Because I don't want to be here again a year from now going through the same thing and then saying, well, I feel sorry for the guy. This has got to be something that is serious. I know a year is serious, but we went through this on the last situation, and here we are again. What's to prevent us from doing this a third time? We need to have some agreement on how this thing will be resolved And I don't know how those things are structured, but they can be structured.
Okay, any other discussion? Joe?
Are you also putting, so all you're doing is a suspension and there's no fine involved, Bob?
Not with the motion, no. It's just a 1-year
Yeah.
suspension.
Unless we want to add a $2,500 fine to pay for that special attention that Mr. Wilson's projects are going to get after 1 year from our building inspector.
Well, I guess one thing you have to consider, this is Chris, is whether he's going to apply for reinstatement, right? Or consider being, by then that registration will be expired, right?
How about we say that if he decides to apply for reinstatement or re-registration, that $2,500 has to be paid to monitor his work? Is that reasonable?
Is that an amendment to your motion?
I'm asking Chris, is that reasonable?
I think that you're going to have to be careful that you're not being arbitrary in terms of establishing. I mean, it's one thing if you want to institute a fine. I think you have that ability under the code now to affix a cost for inspections that are generally available already. I don't think you're on firm ground there.
But if he's not registering, then what's the incentive to pay the fine?
Well, you can go after him to collect that fine. I mean, right now the fine is for his violations. If that's what you do, he hasn't been fined to date. Previously, he wasn't cited by the building inspector at all. So, for you to institute one now, you're going to have a basis in it, and you can make a finding under the code if that's your inclination. I don't think doing it for future speculation and to do something that is already required, you're not going to be on firm ground to do that.
Okay.
So
the
we're back
idea
to
of
Bob.
fines doesn't work really very well.
So we're back to your motion. Any other?
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
I'm searching. John, so you suggested 6-month probation, and within that probation period, it's just a conversation now, and hopefully I can just have this. Within that probation period, was there anything? Was there going to be some kind of guidelines or something for during that probation period of some type, John?
I assume the guidelines are all set up in our building code. I mean,
I don't know if probation is even in the building code, to be
well, it
perfect.
probably isn't. I'm just trying to move this along so we don't end up spending the next 2 years in court.
And
The
John,
longer we talk about this, the more uncomfortable I feel. But it's up to the majority of the group. I understand that. So,
Joe, this is Chris. Probation isn't it? You can make a probationary register. I'm not worried about that. I think you're on solid ground to do that.
no,
I think that what your question, though, is one, the foundation or basis is the code. You can put whatever conditions you want, whether it's suspension, whether it's probation, you can add conditions in terms of compliance, 0 tolerance, for instance. A review period during that 6 months. Maybe it's 90 days. I'm not advocating for position. I'm trying to help you think through with your question.
I understand. And all I'm trying to do, John, and everybody else, is I'm just trying to get someplace that we could get people comfortable. And I don't know if either side would be happy, but if we just combine the two, and I know it would need an amendment. I'm just throwing it out to see if it's even feasible. We combine the two and say we have 6-month suspension and 6-month probation. And then that's a combination of both, and maybe that would help. I don't know. And I don't know how to address it, Chris, if I'm out of order or not. But I'm just trying to come up with something.
Okay, we have a motion. Any other discussion?
We had an amendment for 1 year.
Yes, that's correct.
Was that seconded by anybody?
I
Pardon
didn't
me,
hear you.
Pete?
Was that seconded by anybody?
Yes,
Seconded.
by Joy. I wanted to explain to everybody one thing, and it's actually contrary when Chris and I talked earlier today. I don't feel, because I'm a builder here in town, I don't think, at least in my mind, I should not be passing judgment. I'll discuss anything you guys want, but I don't think it's fair to not only Steve or anyone else that I pass judgment on somebody who is in the same business in the same town as I am. Now, Chris said that's and Chris, maybe you can help me out here, that I certainly can vote.
That's right. It's a personal preference for you to choose to recuse yourself based. It is not a conflict in and of itself. You're a voting member of the building commission. You have no interest in his. However, you certainly can recuse yourself based on the reasons. But I want to make it clear that it is not a conflict if you choose to.
Okay.
Can I ask Bob? Can I ask a question while we're trying to talk through this?
Mm-hmm.
Bob, you wouldn't have any idea, or not idea, I can't think of the right word, Bob, where I would maybe an amendment to yours where we do it 6 and 6, or that's not. I guess I can't. I don't know if I can even ask you that. I'm looking to try to get a compromise here.
Why don't we suspend for 3 months and put probation for 6 months then?
Well, we've already suspended for 6 months. I would think that if I was suspended from my profession for 6 months, I would be under the impression that I definitely am under the microscope after that. Apparently that hasn't happened. So I don't see where a suspension for 6 months has done us any good.
Well, a suspension of 3 months and probation for 6 months is under the microscope for 9 months, basically.
Right, but if I'd been suspended for 6 months 2 years ago, I would assume I'm under the microscope. And that hasn't seemed to happen. In fact, all I've heard is Mr. Mendoza's responsible too. That bothers me.
Well, I'm like Joe. I think I would like to get this worked out some way that, I realize it sounds like people want to pound the flesh or whatever, but.
No, but John, just so you know, I know we're not voting or anything, but I personally wouldn't accept anything less than 6 month suspension. But that's just for conversation's sake. So anyway.
No, this is Joy. I would second Joe's amendment.
What is it?
Yeah, what is it?
Joe's amendment was 6 months suspension and 6 months probation.
And obviously, Joy, I second it because I brought it up. Anybody else?
So that was Joe. Holy Christ, you guys are killing me. So that's Joe's motion, Joy's second. Any other discussion?
I don't know that you can have two seconded motions on the floor at the same time. I mean, we're calling that an amendment, but it's actually in direct contradiction to the original amendment.
Yeah, I would say the cleaner way is to vote on Dr. LeMay's, or Dr. LeMay chooses to withdraw and amend his.
Okay.
In the interest of eating dinner tonight, I'm going to withdraw my motion.
You guys are killing me.
Yeah, I know.
So then Joe's motion then is 6 months suspension and 6 months probation. Joy seconded it. Any other discussion?
And whatever Chris had brought up, during that suspension period, I don't know what we would say, but something to give us degree of comfort. I don't know how to, not suspension period, probation period. I apologize.
I'd make an amendment too, given the fact that a 6-month suspension has had relatively little effect. I'd like to add a $2,500 fine.
Second that.
Okay, hold on. All right, any discussion on that? Okay, so the motion on the table is a 6-month suspension and a 6-month probation after that, and a $2,500 fine. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's have a vote. Joe,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
John Coker,
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Okay, that is, even if I said no, it wouldn't make much difference. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That motion carries.
Okay, and then Larry, in the interest of treating all the contractors and subcontractors fairly, I'd like to ask Lou to contact Mr. Mendoza. Let's find out from Mr. Mendoza his take on what happened in terms of these locates, and let's bring that information to the next building commission, because we may need to have a meeting with Mr. Mendoza too.
Yeah, I can do that, no problem.
And could I get a quick clarification? Larry, did you abstain or vote yes on that?
No, I'm not going to vote. I don't think that that's fair. And Chris said I'm perfectly within the law to do so, but morally, I don't think that's fair for me to vote on somebody that's in the same business as I do in the same town.
And Larry, can I have a point of clarification? Would Mr. Wilson be able to complete the jobs he's currently on? Because I think I read somewhere that they could complete.
You guys are the lawyers. You got to.
I would think we'd have to get a definition of complete, because right now, for example, at 2516, I think it's 16, he has a permit to finish up the basement, and we have not approved the other permits that he submitted.
Well, whatever permits he's been approved on, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Not addition, I mean, what's on the books already?
Providing he pays the fine and all else is cleared. If he doesn't pay the fine, no, he cannot.
Okay, anything else from the building commission?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to close the.
No, we can't yet, Joe. Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public comment? Any public comment? You would have to unmute yourself. I don't see any. Bob, unless you see any hands raised, I think that's only on your screen.
Yeah, I don't see any hands raised. If anybody wants to say anything, unmute yourself and talk. Not hearing anybody.
All right.
The motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
I'll second that.
All those or do I have to roll call that vote?
Oh,
Aye.
Technically, you're supposed to, yeah.
Bye.
Okay.
It's unanimous.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.